Hello and welcome to another Ark tutorial. Today we're going to talk about the 10 things I wish I knew before I started Ark, because there's a lot to learn in this game, so hopefully I can make it a bit easier for you. Stick around to the end because there's an awesome bonus tip you don't want to miss. The first thing I want to talk about today is movement speed. Movement speed is often overlooked because there are seemingly more important stats you could put your points into. Oftentimes I see people put points into weight and health first, and to be fair, those are valid strategies. But in my experience, putting as many points as I can into movement speed right off the bat has helped me stay alive longer because I'm able to outrun many of the creatures that want me dead. Unless you're doing a note run, you'll be leveling at a slow but steady pace, which means you'll need to prioritize your stats as you gain experience. I usually stop leveling movement speed altogether when it hits 160% because I can outrun a vast majority of the creatures on the Ark. Too often I find myself on foot having to outrun predators even in late game when tames are abundant, so movement speed will help you long term. Health, weight, and stamina are certainly important stats to level up, but you'll find yourself lasting much longer in the early game when your movement speed is increased, and at the end of the day, let's be real, surviving is the name of the game. Speaking of surviving, the next tip is about leading wild creatures away from your base. Sometimes you'll have to go out on a resource run away from your base, and when you return, you'll find Carnos, Raptors, Theres, or other scary creatures have started to encroach on your base. Oftentimes, trying to run right past them and hide in your base will result in them attacking, and if your base isn't made out of stone yet, they'll definitely destroy your home and kill you much more quickly than you'd expect. Instead of risking literally everything you've worked for, consider these options. Option 1. Kill the creatures. Killing the creatures can prove far too difficult for some players in the early game, especially if those players are on foot with stone tools and no tames, making this option entirely impossible. However, it's definitely the best option because it ultimately leads to your safety. Option 2. Lead the creatures as far away as possible. You might be able to take advantage of the fact that many creatures will chase you if you get within a certain range of them. There's almost always a visual or auditory cue for when they've aggroed on you, so as soon as you see or hear it, turn around and run. If you run long enough, they'll become disinterested and lose aggro. Option 3. Let the creature aggro onto another creature. This option is basically the same as option 2, but instead of running as far as you can, you might want to try running the predator into a parasaur, trike, or other non-aggressive creature so it stops attacking you. All three of these options are great, but the first one is a permanent solution. Options 2 and 3 may cause you to end up in the same situation again, so always be aware of your surroundings and the risks with these options. Tip number 3 is to use sleeping bags and beds as checkpoints. Let's say you're trying to run a cave that you've never been in before, so you're not sure what kind of dangers lie within. That uncertainty means it's quite likely you'll die inside, so I strongly recommend placing a bed outside the cave for a quick, easy respawn point. Additionally, put sleeping bags down along the inside as checkpoints to prevent you from having to run the whole cave again. Of course, when you respawn, you'll be naked, so having checkpoints inside is a great way to avoid running the whole thing naked, monarchy style. You could use this in many situations that don't involve caves as well, like traveling through the snow, or in the early game when you spawn in and want to move to a better base location. Get creative with this, but just do me a favor and make sure you put a bed down in your base, yeah? Cool. Moving on. Tip number 4 is about using traps to tame creatures. Most of the creatures you'll want to tame will try to attack you as soon as you start shooting them with drank arrows, and as a beginner, the success rate of taming that creature drops to basically nothing if that happens. Even experienced players avoid taming things out in the open because it's risky and, frankly, annoying. Definitely use a trap when taming 90% of the creatures you see. Traps are far less complicated than you might expect, and if you've ever successfully outrun a creature that's trying to eat you, you've already got 99% of the mechanics down. The easiest and most common trap, in my opinion, is the pitfall trap. This works for a vast majority of land creatures and doesn't require much skill or thought to use. This usually involves some foundations, some door frames, and ramps, so as soon as it's set up, let the creature chase you straight into the trap. This requires you to either have enough movement speed to keep up with the creature or have a flyer that can outrun it. Either way, most creatures are super dumb and will fall right in. There are tons of trap designs on the internet for specific creatures and all different types of creatures too, including flyers, gliders, jumpers, burrowers, etc. So don't feel bad about looking up a trap for something you want to tame. I definitely wish I knew about traps before I played Ark because they make life so much easier. Anyway, tip number 5 is about using net guns because traps are overrated and costly. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Traps are absolutely necessary and won't be going anywhere anytime soon, but the net projectile is incredibly OP for knocking out creatures that don't require a ton of darts or arrows to put to sleep, like a Maywing. Maywings are super fast and will almost always avoid being tamed if you don't chase them down, which is super annoying and dangerous, especially since they're in the redwoods on Fjordur. So if you shoot the net projectile at them, they'll be immobilized for 60 seconds, which gives you plenty of time to load them up with torpor. Net guns can immobilize creatures as big as an Allosaurus, so I recommend trying it out if you're curious. You do need the harpoon gun, which unlocks at level 43, and net projectiles, which also conveniently unlock at level 43. So carry a few of them around with you in case you see something nice you want to tame. Another thing I wish I would have known about before I started playing Ark is the taming tracker. Since we've been talking so much about tames, it might be useful for you to know how to track them. All you've got to do is open your inventory, click this button, and you'll have a list of creatures you're currently taming. Just click the one you want to track and bam, there's a marker for you. This is insanely useful for passive tames like the Andrewsarchus or the Cinemacrops, since those creatures require you to give them some distance. When you track a dino, if you stare at the marker for a second, the taming HUD comes up so you can check the status of the tame from anywhere on the map without having to open your inventory or get close. This feature is invaluable and doesn't require mods or anything, so if you play Ark, you have access to this feature. I hope it serves you well. Tip number 7 is about whistles. Whistling creatures is important because there are many situations where you'll have to tell a creature to attack or flee or land or stop or follow, etc. All of those commands can be accessed by holding B on Xbox, circle on PlayStation, and T on PC. You get this big whistle wheel that seems complicated at first, but it's all pretty straightforward. The reason I've put this tip here though is because I used to have creatures fly away when I dismounted them, like this. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why it was happening and just chalked it up to poor code. But it turns out that the creature was following another creature at my base. So when I got off, it wanted to go follow the other tame and flew away. You can always tell when a creature is following something by looking under its name. It'll say X creature is following Y creature. To stop this, either jump on the tame it's following and whistle stop all, or look at the creature and whistle stop one. I went over that a little fast, so if you're still not sure what the heck I said, I have a whole video about whistles that goes much more in depth with this topic. Additionally, did you know you can command creatures to attack a specific target or to move as a group to a specific location? For Xbox, use left bumper and up on the D-pad for move here, and left bumper and up for attack. For PlayStation, it's the same combo. L1 and up on the D-pad and L1 and down on the D-pad. For PC, use comma and period, respectively. Tip number 8 seems to be a bit of a recent issue because new maps are coming out that are allowing survivors to unlock engrams from a bunch of different maps. So if you think you should be able to unlock an engram but can't even see it, make sure you deselect this filter in your engrams menu. Having this selected shows you engrams that are available only on the island or whatever map you've selected, which honestly isn't very convenient for anyone. I want to know what I have available to me right now. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if there's a setting you can change to turn that off by default, but for now, just know that it exists and that you're not crazy. You should definitely be able to make a Maywing saddle on Lost Island and Fjordur. Also, pro tip while we're on the subject, use the search bar to search for specific engrams instead of scrolling through that massive list. It'll save you time and headaches. Anyway, tip number 9 is about chainsaws and how incredibly amazing they are. If you've played Ark for any length of time, you know how important wood is in the early and mid game. That means it's in your best interest to gather a lot of it, and there's honestly no better way to collect it than a chainsaw, at least not that I've seen. I've heard people use all sorts of different creatures to harvest wood, but from all the tests I've done over the years, the chainsaw cannot be beat. It's great at harvesting a ton of other resources too, like this entire list of resources here. Do yourself a favor and make sure you put this on the list of items to craft once you get a fabricator down. Definitely also consider getting a mining drill too, but you've got to be level 80 for that, although it's definitely worth it. You can think of a chainsaw like a hatchet, meaning it'll gather more wood and hide, and a mining drill like a pickaxe, meaning it'll gather more thatch and flint. Tip number 10 is a collection of very basic tips for those beginners out there that are struggling with Ark's poor UI. Firstly, you can access a tame's inventory while riding it by tapping X on Xbox, square on PlayStation, and F on PC. Secondly, you can transfer a whole stack of items from your inventory to another inventory by holding A on Xbox, X on PlayStation, or by tapping T on PC. I know this is super basic, but if any of you just had an epiphany, maybe leave a like. Also, I do have a whole video dedicated to navigating Ark's UI that you might be interested in watching. Before you go, I do have a bonus tip for you. Use all the tips I've talked about today to get yourself a refining forge and a smithy as soon as possible. From there, you'll have access to pistols, shotguns, pikes, sickles, metal armor, metal structures, and so much more. So get there as quickly as you can. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!